Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is U.S. immigration attorney Hardam Tripathi from Trip Law. We're a firm based out of Lakeland, Florida, and today we're going to be discussing the F1 Fiance visa. Now, the Fiance visa is a really great opportunity for those who are U.S. citizens in the United States who may have a significant other in a other country who is trying to come to America with the intent of getting married to that U.S. citizen. Now, what is the process and what all does it entail? So basically what happens is when you are a U.S. citizen petitioning for your significant other who's an immigrant overseas, you first have to file what is called an I-129F. This is a form, it's a petition for that person overseas that you're trying to bring over, that you're petitioning for, and ultimately it's a form that you have to submit to USCIS. This form will ultimately take some time processing. It varies, but it can take about 6 to 8 months, and ultimately what will happen is this form will then go to USCIS, and USCIS will then process that application. Once that application is processed, you will get then, the U.S. citizen will get a notice basically saying that they've ultimately had that petition approved, and then at that time it'll go to the NVC, or the National Visa Center at the U.S. Department of State. Now at that time, that U.S. citizen will then, after having petitioned, will ultimately have to then have that immigrant go for what is called a visa interview for that fiancé visa, that K-1 visa. And ultimately, in order to do that, they have to file what is called a DS-160. And a DS-160 is a form that will be filed online on the State Department portal, and ultimately, once they file that, they will then be approved, and then we'll have an interview to ultimately go to at that consulate or embassy abroad. Now, there's a lot of other processes involved with respect to this, but this is just a more high-level overview of kind of what all steps are involved. Once they actually go to the embassy or consulate for their interview, they will then basically pass that interview with some advice from counsel and hopefully being prepared. And once they do pass, they will then come to the United States and then have the opportunity to get married to that U.S. citizen within 90 days. Now, there are a couple rules that do have to be followed prior to even applying. Some of these rules are that you do have to have met your significant other, that immigrant, that U.S. citizen has had to have met him about at least one time in the 2 years prior to that filing date. So that's very important to know. That's one of the first parameters that are very important to know when actually applying or petitioning for that immigrant when they're coming here to the United States. They also have to have been a U.S. citizen petitioner. They actually have had to have some sort of bona fide relationship. It cannot be a fraud-based relationship. There has to be evidence that has to be provided to USCIS and the State Department. And this evidence can be ultimately the intent to marry, engagement photos. It can be paperwork showing affidavits of support that will also have to be filed that shows that you can legally support them and financially support them, the U.S. citizen, with respect to the actual immigrant. There'll also be either text messages or phone calls or screenshots, things like that that show that there was a relationship that wasn't a bona fide type of relationship throughout this time period of this relationship happening. Now, as long as the marriage or the engagement is valid over in that country, that will be allowed. So we do have clients who, certain situations where they may be homosexuals in some of those countries, they may not be allowed to have that marriage be considered legal. So they'll actually probably get married in another country, or they'll try to get their engagement, in another country and then come over to the United States for fiance visa purposes or for adjustment of status purposes. So this is something very important to talk to your lawyer about as well. There's a lot of different nuances. So basically, once all that process is done, it's very important to be prepared for that State Department and consulate interview to make sure you're bringing all the proper documentation, you're printing out the actual payment receipt where you paid the filing fee. You're also going to have that receipt notice showing that the application was submitted through the State Department. So all these things are very important to bring to the interview. So if you have any questions with respect to your fiance visa, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to assist you and walk you through the facts of your case, seeing if you're eligible to even apply, and then if you are eligible, what all supporting documentations you will need, what part of the processes you'll have to go through, and how to ultimately build that winning package so that you can then ultimately come to the United States as that immigrant and then get married to your loved one. So thank you very much for tuning in on this high-level review of what all is involved in basically applying for a fiancé K-1 visa. Thank you and best of luck with your immigration journey.